Alvin Kamara suspended for 3 games. Zach Charbonnet coming back from his shoulder injury before we all thought he would. And Sean Payton says Javonte Williams will be playing in the preseason this season. This is Matt Mormon. This is the ADP Average Dudes podcast, and we're going to do a little roundup of some news here. Stuff going on through kind of the second week of training camp. Preseason's approaching. We've had the Hall of Fame game already go through. So let's talk about what's going on here in the wonderful world of the NFL, what that means for your fantasy football team. So first of all, the big news of the week, Alvin Kamara. It's officially official. He is suspended for 3 games. Now, I think a lot of us have been kind of approaching Alvin Kamara as if it would be maybe a 6-game suspension on kind of the high end of things. Probably more like a 4-game suspension, I think, as things kind of moved along here. I think a lot of us kind of moved into that range for him. And so with Kamara, I settled on him now at being my running back 27, which I feel like is a little on the lower side. Now, you got to remember, last year Kamara was incredibly frustrating and incredibly inefficient. If you had him, you know this. So it wasn't just the looming suspension that I think has brought me to this point with him. I've got him behind a guy we're going to talk about a little bit later in Javonte Williams. I've got him actually behind Rachaad White, who I don't really like all that much. I've got him behind Dameon Pierce. I currently have him behind Dalvin Cook. That's kind of landing spot dependent as far as Cook goes. With Kamara, last season, he did not have a great year. He hasn't had I believe it's a 40-yard run in 2 seasons now. His touchdowns fell off considerably last year. His catches have fallen off each of the last 2 years since Drew Brees left. Now, obviously, Derek Carr coming in, I think that could actually be a really good thing for him from the reception standpoint. Although, theoretically, Michael Thomas is going to be playing too. Michael Thomas actually healthy for once right now. So there's a lot of questions going on with the New Orleans offense with Alvin Kamara. And it being a 3-game suspension, I don't like taking suspended players very much. I think that I prefer having a bit more roster flexibility. So for me, even though it's only 3 games, that matters to me. And so that kind of brought him down a little bit in my rankings. So I'm sure me and Tanner will talk much more about Alvin Kamara when he's on the show with me here in the coming days. Let's move on here. Let's just quick hit. I've got a ton of things on the dock here to touch on. So we're going to hit all these pretty quick. We're going to talk about Sean Payton here. Sean Payton saying Javonte Williams, the running back for the Broncos, will play in the preseason. This is great news. Javonte, of course, he had the ACL tear last season. There were complications. This was more like a J.K. Dobbins ACL tear where it wasn't just a clean, just ACL. There was some issues with other ligaments in the knee. And I think a lot of us have kind of treated Javonte's injury as worse than Breece Hall's injury. And I'm starting to kind of backpedal on that a little bit. I'm starting to think that Javonte is going to have a full workload more soon than what we'll see that out of Breece Hall. And look, we're just talking about Alvin Kamara, all the success that he had way back when with Drew Brees. Well, that was with Sean Payton too. And Sean Payton, in all iterations of his offense, has had really great running backs. And running backs really involved in the passing game. I love Javonte Williams as a player. Going into last year, I was incredibly high on Javonte. So, I was very nervous for a lot of the summer. They signed Samaje Perine. I was worried as to what that would mean for Javonte. And having the news that he will at least play in the preseason in some capacity. He's been very unlimited, I guess would be the way to phrase it, in camp so far. He has not been limited in camp very often. So that's a great news also. They have worked in a few rest days for Javonte to have a little bit of time off in camp, but he's been pretty much a full go. And by all accounts, has been looking really good. So that's great news. That's going to shoot him up a little bit. I moved him up finally. I've had him down around RB30 all summer, and it's broke my heart to do it. I moved him up to RB26. If you kind of view him with Kamara, right? I have them back-to-back. I prefer Javonte now because at least, if it takes Javonte 3 games to get going, then at least I was able to use him maybe as a desperation, or in an early season, you aren't going to have too many desperation plays early on in the season, but you can use him though, right? Whereas Kamara, you're literally not going to be able to use him for 3 weeks. And then Kamara, there might be a ramp-up period, right? Just kind of being gone for 3 weeks versus Javonte, that week 4 might be when the reins are off for him. That'd be incredibly exciting. Ironically, at running back 28, right behind those guys, I have Kenneth Walker, and he is still out right now for the Seattle Seahawks in camp. He's dealing with an injury, but his running mate, Zach Charbonnet, me and Tanner have talked a lot about him over the last couple of months. Me and Tanner both love Charbonnet's potential as a sleeper in the Seattle Seahawks offense. He is back at practice now. So he had that shoulder injury. Last week, me and Tanner talked about that a little bit because it kind of came through while we were on the show. We were worried about this. What does that mean for a rookie? If they're going to miss out on camp, that means that they could really have a hard time getting into the good graces with the offense and good graces with the coaching staff if they don't see that trust factor in training camp. Well, Charbonnet's back. Walker still isn't. Great opportunity for Zach Charbonnet. All right, so we spent about 5-6 minutes on those three. We're going to quicken the pace up as those were kind of the three big news items of the last week. So we're just going to hit quickly on the rest of these. Josh Jacobs, still not reported yet with the Vegas Raiders, still has not signed his franchise tag. If that tag were to be revoked, there are reports that both the Kansas City Chiefs and the Denver Broncos would be interested in Josh Jacobs. I would imagine a lot of teams would be interested in Josh Jacobs if that franchise tag were to be revoked. Sean Payton called Cooper Kupp's hamstring injury more day-to-day. He hopes to have him back by the time the joint practices happen with the Raiders in a couple of weeks. Obviously, that's good news for Cooper Kupp. I still have him at my wide receiver 3, just ahead of Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs, because we are so far out. And if he does come back in about 2 weeks, I wouldn't have any hesitation taking him as the third player off the board. Robert Saleh, the Jets head coach, he expects Garrett Wilson to return this week to practice. Of course, he had that low ankle sprain on the same day where Joe Burrow hurt his calf. We were all very worried, very scared by a low ankle sprain, far less damaging than a high ankle sprain. Garrett Wilson hopefully will be back this upcoming week. One player who won't be back anytime soon, Eno Benjamin. I know it's kind of a sweetheart for a lot of us. A lot of us kind of had mediocre, middling to higher hopes for Eno as kind of a backup running back in the past, and it never quite came to fruition. He landed with the Saints, and unfortunately, he has torn his Achilles. So while Kamara's going to be gone for 3 games, that is one less person to have in that backfield. That could just mean more work for Kendry Miller. That could mean more work for Jamal Williams during that time. And no Eno Benjamin for the Saints this year. Chase Edmonds is expected to be the third down back for Tampa Bay this year. That is just another kind of ding and dent against Rachaad White. We've talked a lot about how we think the catches for him are going to go down. We think the efficiency is going to go down. And if he's not playing, basically a Najee Harris level workload, that's just another reason to be a bit more concerned about Rachaad White. Odell Beckham Jr. and Zay Flowers, they continue to impress at Ravens camp. My personal Twitter or X timeline is filled up with highlights of these two, especially Zay Flowers, all over the place. John Harbaugh does expect Rashad Bateman to be back soon from the PUP list. He is still dealing with that Liz Frank injury. He had, I believe, a screw removed over the summer from his foot. He's been on the PUP list. So Zay Flowers and Odell really kind of earning their keep as the wide receivers 1 and 2 in this offense. Look, I've really come around on Zay as a sleeper for this season. I think that the Todd Monken offense, I finally kind of got around to seeing what a lot of other people saw with what that can mean for Zay, how I think Zay could be very good for the RPO game and the short area game. I still have worries from a functionality offensive standpoint, a receiver that small with a quarterback who doesn't have great accuracy. I still have those concerns, but I do think they're going to really be able to scheme him up and do some stuff with him. The Colts, they signed Kenyon Drake. Jonathan Taylor still on the PUP list. It doesn't sound likely anymore that he's going to go on that non-football injury list, so it sounds like it will just still be a PUP list situation for Jonathan Taylor. I've moved him down significantly in my rankings. I've got him now down at running back 6, which isn't that many spaces, but those are significant spaces, right? When you're talking that close to the top of the draft board, I would still take my chances with Taylor over my chances with Josh Jacobs. I would still take him over Tony Pollard for now. I think that might change soon. But, that kind of depends on whether or not Pollard ends up getting a real running mate still in this offense. At this point, I've moved Nick Chubb and Saquon Barkley both ahead of him. I've had Bijan ahead of him for a good while now. Next up on the news, the Sam Laporta, the rookie tight end for the Detroit Lions. He, quote, looks like the tight end 1, according to the Athletics' Colton Pouncey. And look, I'm never big on the rookie tight ends, and typically that works out well for you to not bet on them. Historically, tight end tight ends in the rookie season are just not very productive from a pass catching standpoint. There's so much for them to learn on the NFL offense. I'm starting to buy into Laporta just a little bit as a low-end tight end 1, higher-end tight end 2. I've actually now got him at the highest among the rookie tight ends at tight end 15 in my rankings right now. So I would take him over a Michael Mayer. I would take him over Dalton Kincaid. I just see a pretty clearer path to being, I don't know about second in the offense in targets, because you do have those 2 running backs that are going to soak up a lot of them. But I could really see Laporta having himself a really good role in this offense, even as a rookie. ESPN's Marcel Luis Jacques, sorry I butchered that name, but this comes from ESPN, and they believe that Braxton Berrios will be Miami's wide receiver 3 in the offense. That's not a role that we saw be very useful last season. It's kind of the Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill show, but I think Berrios could be a guy that could bring a different element. He's really that Cole Beasley style slot receiver. Good hands, doesn't really make big plays. He's probably the slowest guy on this entire offense, when you think about all the track stars that the Miami Dolphins have down there. So I just think it's worth noting, though, that if there were an injury to Waddle or Tyreek, Berrios could be a waiver wire guy mid-season for you. I don't think this means anything for drafting, but hey, just a guy to keep a name in the back of your pocket for. We've seen Berrios have pockets of relevance in the past. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about the Philadelphia Eagles running back situation. There have been kind of different reports, and they're all seemingly positive about each of the 3 guys between Kenneth Gainwell, Rashad Penny, and DeAndre Swift. The Philadelphia Inquirers, they've got a report about Kenneth Gainwell kind of being the 2-minute back, kind of being the passing downs back. But then there's also been, from ESPN, Tim McManus, that DeAndre Swift has been working all over the field, has been used primarily in the passing game. And then there's also reports that Rashad Penny is getting a lot of run with the first team offense. So what does all this kind of mean? To me, this is me moving up Rashad Penny a little bit more. And the reason for that is I don't think there's enough passing volume in this offense to involve 1, let alone 2 running backs in the passing game. I just don't think the Eagles would sacrifice targets for A.J. Brown, or sacrifice Devontae Smith targets, or even sacrifice Dallas Goedert targets in order to give targets to Kenneth Gainwell or DeAndre Swift. I just don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think they're going to sacrifice Jalen Hurts rushes to give more targets to DeAndre Swift either. So Swift being used all over, to me, it's actually not that great. I would rather see him be in a bit more of a traditional running back role, because I think that's where you have your most value as an offensive, as a running back for the Philadelphia Eagles. Miles Sanders last year, he was an RB2 for you in fantasy, and it really came without much in the passing game. Only 26 targets and 20 catches. The Eagles, I believe, also had the fewest targets in the entire NFL to their running backs last season. And so if the vast majority of the 1,269 yards and the 11 touchdowns on 259 carries, if the majority of those things that were vacated by Miles Sanders, if those are going to Rashad Penny, then I think Penny's the guy you want. I don't want the guy who's stepping into 26 vacated targets. I want the guy that's stepping into 259 vacated carries. And it looks to me like that's more going Rashad Penny's route than it is DeAndre Swift's route. So I think these Eagles running backs, someone's going to matter. Someone's going to break through. Maybe it is Swift. Maybe it's even Gainwell a little bit. I think I'm starting to put my my money down on Penny, though. And so we will just keep an eye out on how that plays out, though. And hey, that'll do it for us here at the ADP here tonight. Be sure to check out some of our other shows. Last week, me and Tanner had a couple very good deep dive conversations, talk about different formats and kind of different styles of fantasy football. You can check that one out. We're actually going to have a part 2 for that coming out here really soon. Me and Tanner are going to talk about different styles of drafts and kind of different leagues that are based more on that style of things as opposed to kind of your number of teams, number of bench spots, and those sorts of things. We're going to talk about some different like auction leagues, dynasty leagues, best ball leagues, more of that style of stuff. You're coming up real soon. So keep an eye out for that. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at ADP Dudes. Follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check out the Spotify Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and we will see y'all next time.